Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you all again tonight. Again, we're in for a treat. I tell you what, we've got another good one tonight. Our speaker tonight is Kevin DeBose, who is with the Emerald Youth Foundation. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about what he does there. He's been with them for how many years? 10 years, you say?
Since 2009, so
Since
about 12.
yeah, about 12 years. Steve Diggs speaks very highly of him, and I'm sure that Steve is absolutely correct with that. So, without further ado, I introduce to you Kevin DeBose. Kevin, if you'll just tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey and how you were led to Emerald Youth Foundation, and we'll just go from there, okay?
Sure.
You can stay seated or stand, whichever you want to do.
Okay. Whichever makes me thinner. Let's just try to do it that way. Yeah, thank you so much, not only for having us here, inviting Steve, but also supporting the ministry. That is very important to me because that sustains us. So grateful for you. I have been in ministry with Emerald for 12 years as a staff member. But before that, I've loved the ministry, loved Steve since I met him at a community meeting around 2001, 2002. A little bit about myself. I'm a PK, pastor's kid. Grew up, my dad pastored in Kentucky and California, and everything that you've heard about PK, pastor's kids, I embody all of that, the good and the bad. But that really defined and shaped me growing up. But I always want to point out that the most important person in my spiritual journey was actually my mother. My mother worked with the young people in the youth ministry. I've actually followed her closer in ministry than my dad. My dad, he was 6'6", big, handsome, charismatic, booming voice. I inherited none of that. None of that. He looked at me one day. He said, "You're not going to grow, are you?" I was like, "No." He went to college on a basketball scholarship. So, I was very unique in just how I was. My dad helped lead me to Christ. But I can remember very clearly, and I tell this story to our kids in our program. I was baptized, and grew up in a historically African American church, and we sang songs like "Wade in the Water," "God's Gonna Trouble the Water," and great songs. So when I was dipped in the water, baptized, I really thought that I was never going to sin again. And I can remember, I guess I got to about Thursday of that week, and I got in trouble at school. And, back then they paddled. So I got a paddling, and I came home, and Mom got a hold of me too. And I told her, I was like, "Mom, I don't think the baptism took. I think I'm going to need another dunking." But it was Mom who, in that moment, was able to explain to me, just the process of justification and becoming more like Christ, and all of that I needed to know. Mom was able to impart that. So I was grateful to have both a mom in ministry and a dad in ministry. Grew up. I decided that I did not want to, and key word is I, because, I wasn't consulting the Lord on any of this. I did not want to be a pulpit pastor like my dad, just because of, I didn't really see I had his gifts, really see that I could do what he did. But I always felt called to ministry. And I was a little annoying, probably still am. And I would ask him questions like, "Hey, Dad, we're having good church in here, you know, real good church. But out there, there's like a pimp and a prostitute. You know, how does what we do translate to the street corner?" And my dad would just look at me and be so frustrated. He's like, "Kevin, you can't see how that's, you know, connected." And so we had that dance. I remember the last time my dad really got upset with me. We were in a service and a lady stood up and said, "God is calling me to start a homeless ministry." And I was about 17 at the time, and I raised my hand in the back. And I said, "Hey, have you volunteered at the at the mission down the street?" And I didn't think that was a bad question. But my dad was like, "Why did you ask her that question?" You kind of grieved the spirit in that moment. But I kind of had those questions from an early age, thought I was wired different. And so coming out of college, I decided to do city planning. I thought it was a way to do ministry without having to be involved in church. And so went and got a master's of city planning, came back here, worked in the Victor Ashe administration and a little while in the Haslam's administration, working downtown. And that's how I met Steve. And, you know, I was talking to him about economic development and revitalizing neighborhoods. And Steve was telling me about what he was doing. And I was like, "Oh, I think you're the one who's you're really revitalizing communities." And he was like, "Hey, you know, we could use you involved with our ministry." And so I came on as a volunteer and started getting close to the ministry. And I really felt a tug that, you know, what I was trying to do outside of the church, you know, was really figured out at Emerald Youth Foundation. And he predicted that I would come work for the foundation, and it would take several years for me to get to that point. But yeah, in 2009, came on and worked for the organization at one church, and now I'm responsible for Lonsdale area. Lonsdale, at one point, was our city's most violent neighborhood. And it culminated with the shooting of Xavion Dobson. I know you all remember that. And Xavion was a good kid doing great things, and, you know, just some senseless acts came to his front door. And so God placed us in that neighborhood, and we've been able, through the generosity of this community, we've been able to build a $10-12 million facility on Texas Avenue. I don't know if you've been over there. First class everything. And since then, there's, you know, the youth violence, the crime rate, all of that is going down significant. Lead a team of 13 full-time people there, and a bunch of volunteers, and we offer every different sport, an after-school program that is faith first, learning and health also, and then we have a young adult ministry that is called Calling and Career, where we're trying to help these folks who are going into the 9th grade discover what their calling is. And we're matching them up with mentors in the 12th grade to walk with them through their first job. Our ultimate goal is to create, for the city of Knoxville, promising godly leaders. Okay, we believe that leadership, indigenous leadership, is what is going to revitalize our city. It's hard to revitalize a neighborhood from the outside, but it's sustainable leadership from the inside that creates change. And so these young people may be in the second grade, third grade, fourth grade, but we are hoping that at some point they will be promising godly leaders. And we've developed measures to determine what a promising godly leader looks like. And by the year 2027, we want to produce 200 promising godly leaders for the city of Knoxville every single year. We believe that's an economic development initiative. We believe that's an initiative that's going to bring some spirituality to the city. And we have promising godly leaders now, but not at that scale. We're producing about 30 to 40. And so what Steve's doing now is scaling our organization with that end in mind. We have to continue to grow in order to, on the front end, that's 2,000, 3,000 kids involved in sports programs, after-school programs, but on the back end, that's the promising godly leadership that's going to change our city, that's going to lead organizations, that's going to be on the city council, that's going to be in the classroom. And so that's what God has called him to do, and brought all of us together to help him get that accomplished.
It's a great story, Kevin. Tell me how you feel, how you take God to work with you every day. I know you do. You have to in what you're doing especially. But how do you feel you are doing that, and how does it affect what you do instead of it just being a humanitarian ministry? Does that make sense?
Yes. So I believe that, God has formed me in a certain way. And you heard a little bit, even that annoying kid, that God was forming me for the work I'm doing now. And so I carry those values, those convictions with me in my work. And I think it allows me to be effective in areas that a lot of people are not. And I can give you one example. Close to our facility, of course, $10 million facility. Well, when we broke ground, there was a drug corner there, and so I went over and engaged the drug dealers. And I engaged them in a very friendly but annoying way. I try to love on them. And that's something that they want to do in the dark. And so I started getting their names and making association. Hey, is your auntie such and such? Okay, I think I know. And I would invite them to Bible study, and I'd come over. Hey, man, you want some coffee? I'm going up the street to Starbucks. I'm going to come back with what coffee you like. And they were like, who's this weirdo? But a funny thing happened. About a week later, they disappeared. And I never had one curse conversation with them, never said, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I never said, get out. You're harmful to the community. I just try to love them. And they were like, that's bad for business. So I do think that, what God has put in us can be effective in ways that we're just not really thinking about, but just being myself made it uncomfortable for them to do what they were doing.
Sometimes, as well as a pastor myself, I would know of people who've left the church. Believe it or not, there are people who leave the church from time to time. And a few in particular, you wonder about them, and then several years later you hear that they're out doing some great ministry or something in the community. So don't give up on them. Yes. It's yes. God works in strange and mysterious ways, yes. as we all know. So that would be, have you ever had a time when you feel like your faith or your relationship with the church hindered you in what you would like to do?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think more about it as how I'm formed. And, the way I've been churched, and I realize I'm using church as a verb, that it's evident in who I am. And so sometimes that is limiting. And it's more about how I was churched than my faith. And so I'm thinking of an example. I traveled to a ministry in Los Angeles called Homeboy Industries. Have anybody heard of that? It's actually much bigger than Emerald Youth, about 3 times our size. Well, they're in South Central Los Angeles. And it was started by a man called Father Greg, Catholic. He's written many books, but his most famous book is called Tattoos on the Heart. And so he's working with all these gangbangers. And he started a tattoo removal process, okay? And that became the center of his ministry. And because he realized that these young people could not get jobs with all of these tattoos. And so a lot of the gangbangers in Los Angeles in particularly, they have the tattoos all over their face. And so when I went with a bunch of people from Knoxville, a bunch of pastors, and we were given a tour by a young man. And on his forehead, he had the worst bad word and the police written on his forehead, okay? And he was giving us the tour. And he was telling us about Father Greg. And he gave such a good testimony about how God saved him that I was in tears. Okay, now here's the challenging point in terms of how I was churched. In the middle of all the testimony was a bunch of curse words. And he even apologized. He was like, hey, listen, I have been in juvenile hall all my life. I have been in the system. And I just don't know how to talk any other way. And so I told the group later on, I said, are we too holy to receive what he just said? Because what he said was beautiful. He talked about God finding him in the jail. He said that Father Greg was coming in every day, getting a different gang member and taking him out of jail, bailing him out. And he said, I wish I knew Father Greg. And he said the next day after he said that, Father Greg looked at him, called his name, and said, I'm coming back for you tomorrow. And he equated that to God knowing who we were and knowing our name. And it was just such a theologically sound sermon, I just had to forget the curse words. So it kind of stretched me in a certain way. So that's one way I would say that I had to deepen, understanding and develop a conviction on what really is important.
What's Father Greg's last name? Do you know?
Boyle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm checking. Volunteer Ministry Center, I think,
Yes.
is having him in December
Oh.
for our Carry the Torch luncheon.
Oh, he's the best speaker. Oh my goodness.
Let me find this for sure. I'm not texting or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure that's who it is.
I'm a fanboy of Father Greg. He's led so many of whose society is thrown away to Christ. In Los Angeles, when we were there visiting him, Hillary Duff, the Oscar winner, came by the ministry and dropped off a big check. And
Wow.
so I got a chance to meet her. So that's just, example of the type of impact he's having in Los Angeles. Yeah, there's a couple others. There's another one, Skid Row, that's in Riverside, and there's homeless ministry. But he's in the heart of LA in South Central. Yeah.
I will check that for sure, but I'm pretty sure he's the one. You've heard me talk about Volunteer Ministry Center, and their biggest fundraising event each year is this Carry the Torch. It's had to be postponed twice already this year, but it's scheduled now for, I believe, December 16th. We can find out more about that, but if that's confirmed and I'm correct in that, I hope you'll be present for that. I'm glad to hear this story about him. It makes me even more eager to hear him.
And we just hired a young man from LA, and I didn't realize about him, but he went through Homeboy Industries, and he told me the science behind it. So those tattoo removal sessions, sometimes they take 60 to 70 sessions to remove a tattoo. And so it's very costly. So what Father Greg does is he says, if you stay for the Bible study, we will make this session free. And by the end of 60 sessions, these people are committed Christians. And I'm thinking that's genius, to have something like that, and get guys. I mean, these guys were some scary guys that we met there, and now they're on fire for Christ.
That's wonderful. Your work in Lonsdale, and of course that's where you're doing most of your ministry, and I know you have ministry in East Knoxville. Is that become, I won't say as effective, but are you reaching as many people in East Knoxville as you are perhaps in Lonsdale?
I would say probably our most burgeoning ministry is in East and South.
Okay.
And I used to be responsible for Lonsdale, East and South, and separated that to focus on Lonsdale last year. And I have a colleague that is just doing amazing work in East and South, and working with several churches there. We have a calling and career center in East Knoxville that is probably the fastest growing of those centers. And we have, I think, 4 or 5 churches that are doing, ministry youth outreach there. So a lot of the East Knoxville violence that you heard about this past summer, many of our team in East were intervening with those families, and one of the young ladies was on a volleyball team, so we stepped in a big way with that family.
One of the ladies who was killed was on the, oh wow, yeah. Wow, so you had a very personal connection. Would there be a time that you could recall, and I'm sure there are probably many of these, when you said, and I say this reverently, oh my God, I know you did this. I know you have led me here to do this.
Yes.
A time when you felt like God really had God's hand on you.
Yes, it's recent.
Okay.
It's recent. And, it's easy in this type of work to get tired. And, the scripture says, don't get weary in doing good. And so I've dealt with that. And I have this brand new center, $10 million, that is just special in a lot of ways. And I look around and I see the great things that God is doing there. And there are 5 young men in that community that were just giving me a hard time. And they were defacing the property. When we'd have events and they would run in and do a little havoc. The thing that made me the maddest, and I'll be honest, I was mad. We had a Saturday night event, and the local church donated Chick-fil-A to us. And these guys came in while we were having worship, and no one was manning the food. and they came in and they took the Chick-fil-A and they threw the sandwiches down the hall, and I was so outdone. Mainly for this reason, it's Chick-fil-A. That's good eating. I would have done better if they would have took the sandwiches home, but they threw them down the hallway. So I was really offended. I was like, those are some good sandwiches. And so I left there and I told one of our team members, I said, call the police. I'm not playing with these jokers anymore. We're going to have them arrested. And of course, they were laughing and running around. And they thought it was the greatest thing that, I was so upset. And then I went back to my desk after I told them to call the police. And up on my screen was a sermon that I was preparing. And it was on Jeremiah 29:7, seek the peace of the city that I've exiled you to, pray for it, for in its peace, you'll find your peace. And I thought in that moment, have I even prayed for these boys? Have I even prayed for, I haven't even prayed for them. And I just called the police on them. And so I was convicted. I talked to my small group about it and just very honest. I think I teared up in that small group. And I was like, hey, I got these boys. They're giving me a hard time and enjoying it. And, I haven't prayed for them. And so we all began to pray for those 5 young men. Well, about 2 weeks later, the ringleader came and sat next to me. And he said, Mr. Kevin, I'm sorry about messing up. He's like, nobody wants me. I just get kicked out of everything. And we had this conversation. I was like, okay, this is prayer. This is prayer working. And then by the summer, this was in the spring, by the summer, he was enrolled in our program. Okay, and now he's one of our leaders. This has just happened like, when I was ready to have him arrested was like April. And so I went back to my small group and I said, guys, as Christians, do we forget the power of prayer? Because I know I did. I know for in this situation, I forgot the greatest weapon I have, and that's prayer. And we gave that situation to God. We got all 5 of those boys in program. Yep.
How do you generally bring people into the into the program? Do you go out? It's probably a combination thing. You go out and invite, or they hear about you and they come in, or does law enforcement ever send someone to you? What's the best way of reaching out and finding young people?
Yeah, and I think it's different from different groups. I think elementary age, I always tell my team, their parents are motivated by the need for safety. Mom, dad are working. Some of them have 2 jobs. Some of them work odd hours. They need a place for them to be safe. It's great that we're Christian, but a lot of them, their primary motivation is not that we're Christian. It's to keep them safe. And but it gives us an open door to get to the whole family. Middle schoolers, they have a choice. Mom and dad kind of leave it up to the kids, so it's more of a sense of belonging with them. Many of the middle schoolers want to belong, or, it's just an awkward period for middle schoolers. High schoolers, they're trying to put tools in their tool belt for their next steps. And so each one of those motivations lead to how they come to the ministry. So it's very easy to recruit, in an urban area, younger kids, because, moms and dads want them there. Middle school, it's harder. And so we have to make sure that these young men and women feel loved and cared for, and developing community, particularly in this age of social media, which is just so divisive and so toxic. And then with our high schoolers, they need some practical resources, available to them to help them solve problems. Because many times, when they're looking to go to college, they may not have someone inside that household that has took that step. And they may have someone in their household that don't want them to take this step, McDonald's is paying $15 an hour now, and so that's competing with, kids wanting to go to that next step. So, we're trying to meet everyone where they are.
Best way to do it. I know you would ask everyone here and everyone with whom you come in contact to pray for the Emerald Youth Foundation. Is there a specific way you would ask us to pray in a general way, and then is there a specific thing, such as the guys that you prayed for, something like that you would ask us to pray for?
Yeah. So my list has grown to 9 young men that I'm really personally praying for, and I'm just one location. So my colleagues, they have a group of folks that they're praying for as well. So yeah, I think this youth violence in our city has got to stop. Okay, it's got to stop. We are not Chicago. We're in a city this size, with all of the resources we have, with the good folks of Knoxville. This is inconsistent with I'm being a little prideful, I realize, but I'm sorry. But I love this place. Absolutely. And so we just can't have it here. And so I'm praying every day that God will give us the wherewithal to really get at the problem. I'm reading a book now that says you have to identify the shooters in middle school. You can't engage them in high school. They're too hardened by then. So the tender heart, starts to leave 8th grade. And so those kids who are isolated and disconnected, you gotta identify them, and you gotta surround them with spiritual people. So the book encourages you to create groups of business people and pastors and others to give community to, those young men that you think could have the potential to do something like that, because those who you think might have the potential 5 years later becomes the ones who are doing it. And so, yeah, keep that in your prayer. I think the vision that Steve's been given, it's a God-sized vision for these 200 promising godly leaders every year. That's going to take a lot from our city to get us there. So keep that in prayer, and and every church, can support us through prayers. I'm further convinced from this summer that prayer still works.
And I know you're being very modest, but certainly we want to pray for you in the work you're doing day after day after day. It's one reason I had the vision of doing this kind of program on Wednesday night, to find out what people are doing in our city, the day-to-day people who are keeping our city running, and not just running, but making it better. Yeah. And that's what you and your cohorts there at the Emerald Youth Foundation are doing. So we appreciate it very much. Let's see what questions you all have. Debbie?
Do you have much contact or interference from the gangs that seem to be creating the melee in the eastern section of the town?
No, and I kind of wish we did. Back when I was growing up, which was a long time ago, and I spent some time in California, there were identified gang leaders, and the gang leaders had rules. And, there was ways to get to those leaders and reason with them. A lot of what we're seeing now is just younger kids with access to guns that don't have, I mean, they call themselves gang members, but they're not going by a certain code. And a lot of it's driven by social media. So they'll see a post or, a picture or something, and it sends them, looking for another person. So it's just hard to really, it's unorganized. And so it's even like the drug traffic, like I told you about going to the drug dealers. I know how to deal with those guys. But, the younger youth violence is very challenging because it's just so unorganized. And, the availability of those weapons is just tragic.
Other questions? I think many of you know that I grew up at Emerald Avenue United Methodist before Emerald Youth Foundation was even a dream or a vision. And I'm so proud of what they're doing. It's just amazing. When I was district superintendent, and again, I might have used this in a sermon, there's several churches there in the heart of the city right there in North Knoxville, and two or three other Methodist churches. And one of them had been challenged to have a community ministry. This was about the time Emerald Avenue was getting involved in that, maybe even before. And they declined that opportunity because they didn't want their building to get dirty. And now that church is just all but dead. They're just not reaching anyone. So, when we have the opportunity to do that, we got to do it. We have, Reverend Leah Burns at Linden City. Okay, we have her scheduled to come later in this series. Looking forward, she's pastor at Linden City there in East Knoxville, and we're looking forward to having her. I heard her one night. They had a prayer, a ministry of prayer one evening. It's been 2 or 3 months ago, and she spoke, and she's riveting. She just has a wonderful message and a love for God. Any other questions or comments? Anything we might want to ask Kevin about his work or about the Emerald Youth Foundation?
What are your hours, Pastor, over there in that building? I guess you don't.
Yeah, so I always tell our team we're second shift people. And so we don't really have a close time. It's when the activity's over. So now that we have field lights, we're going to about 9 every night. After school programs are starting around 3. We have some young adult things happening in the daytime, and of course, our administrative offices. So in my location, we're on from 9 to 9 for the most part. We have another team down the street where our headquarters, where our accounting and our HR, they keep more of a business hours there, except for Steve Diggs. He works all hours of the day. But, in our ministry centers, we're sort of second shift.
So are you close to the Sansom courts, the volleyball courts there? Is that the same?
Yeah, so there's 2 facilities. So down on 17th in Dale is the Sansom Sports Complex. Then in Lonsdale on Texas is the Haslam Sansom Ministry Complex. And so we're a little different in that we have not only the field sports, but we have a 33,000 square foot building, and all of our ministries are under one roof there.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And you grew from, of course, the church there at Emerald Avenue, the building across the street. I think St. Mary's sold that to you all for $1 a year or something like that.
So
leased it to you, and that's still part of your ministry, isn't it? The building directly or a block down.
Yeah, on Central was our first headquarters, and you're right, St. Mary's built us a gym there and leased it to us for many years for $1. And then they gifted to us a few years ago. And before then, we never owned a building. We were in ministry all over the city, and didn't own a building. But we love those dollar-a-year leases. So several organizations and individuals in town have done that because that keeps them involved with us. The building I'm in, the Sansom family and the Haslam family still own that, and they're with us. And it's good to have a landlord sometimes.
Absolutely.
So we're really grateful for that.
You have any idea how many children and youth are counted, if you count them, among you in your ministry now, involved in it
Yeah.
one way or another?
So we're really getting close to 3,000 a year. And just 4 years ago, we crossed the threshold of 2,000.
Wow.
So it didn't take us 4 or 5 years to get to 3. So we're really close. And that does not include Emerald Academy. We birthed a charter school, a K through 8 charter school. What we were seeing was, by the time graduates from our urban high school, Austin East and Fulton, only 1% of them, the graduates, were scoring a 28 on their ACT. Why is that number important? Well, that was the average of the incoming freshmen at UT. And so you take that down to ninth grade, only 5% of the ninth graders were proficient in English and math. And so our board, along with Steve, said, hey, we have to intervene here. And so we created a K through 8 charter school. It's a separate organization to try to get more kids on grade level by the time they're in ninth grade, because we do believe that's key to creating that promising godly leader, is to have a good, solid base to work from, so you can have a good job, be able to be a leader in your community. And we don't want to end that before it's time if not on grade level and all of that. So Emerald Youth Foundation is a little over 80 full-time employees right now across the city, and about another 50 or 60 from the school. So God has used this ministry in a great way.
What kind of results are you seeing from the academy? Or can you measure the results yet?
Yes. So the state has, and it probably won't be published since they're not publishing these things during the pandemic, but the state has determined that Emerald Academy already in its, the 6th or 7th year, is a B school, a letter grade. They assign a letter grade to every school. Yeah. Now, why is that important, a B? Well, 7 years ago, most of the inner city schools were D's and F's. There was only one C school. Okay, so we're outperforming all of the other urban schools. Now, the schools on the edge of Knox County are A schools, and that's what brings the average up. But in the core of the city, not so much. And so we're real proud of that. The students are testing well. We've had, I think 3 graduating classes now of the 8th grade. And, very proud of the outcomes coming out of Emerald Academy.
That's great. That's great. Any other questions? Okay, John?
Do you run into any students that are mentally deprived? If you do, how do you work with them?
Yeah. So you mean the foundation or Emerald Academy? Okay. So the foundation, we take one, take all. We're in ministry to everyone, regardless of where you are. The same is true for Emerald Academy. So they do a lot of lottery, and we have a very high percentage of students with special needs who have an IEP. So we don't deny anyone. So they have a robust special services department, and they work with them. So the way our charter school law in the state works is you have to accept everyone, and so we turn turn no one away, regardless of their condition. So, and try to work with them the best we can. Yes, ma'am.
For your after-school programs and your other youth programs, are there fees for the parents or?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a great question. We do charge a fee. We think it's important. You know, so the elementary students pay $65 a semester. Okay. Middle school pays $35 a semester. So there's 3 semesters, spring, fall, and summer. So an elementary school student can come every day for, you know, what's 3 times 65, about $180. Not even 100 for.
That doesn't pay for their snack.
No. And to be honest with you, I was just looking at that, in terms of what it costs to put on a program, it's a very small, it pays for their field trips, that's what it does. But also, it's bigger than that. We want our parents to be investors in their own children's progress. And it's skin in the game. You know, we feel like if there's skin in the game, then they will be committed to the outcomes we want to see. But if it's free, it's just like maybe a city recreation center where kids show up when they want to and not committed. We want kids. We don't want them picking up their kids early, because we're like, hey, we got different resources here that at the end of the process are supposed to raise your reading and math. So we want you here, and so we find that it's good charity. We don't want to be toxic in our charity by creating dependency or entitlement. But here's the thing: that $65 number has been the same ever since I've been with Emerald Youth. So we have not raised it, and not everyone pays. So there are times I go to my friends, church members, and say, hey, there's a couple kids that, we need the $65 from that they won't be able to pay, and they'll give me the money for it. So we find a way for anybody. We turn no one away, and we try to get the fees from those families who can.
Do you always feel safe over there? I know that Bobby was safe, you probably did.
Yeah, I do. I learned when I was studying to be a city planner that there are certain indicators of a safe neighborhood. Okay, a woman walking her child in a stroller is a big statement. I was at a conference one time, and a guy said when he sees a young woman jog around the corner and it's in an urban neighborhood, he starts looking for property. Okay, because it tells him everything he needs to know. So funny things happening. I see all these strollers of women, and we got joggers now, and so I'm like, okay, this neighborhood has really changed. So yeah, I do. I lock up most nights between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, and yeah, I don't feel unsafe anymore.
If I were a young parent living in one of the suburban areas where the schools are graded A, for example, or B at the lowest, but I wanted my children to be in a more diverse climate to receive their education, is there a possibility they could be enrolled at the academy?
Yeah, so the way the charter law works in the state of Tennessee is it's a lottery system, and anyone in the county with a county address can apply. Okay. So anyone apply, and not everyone who goes to Emerald Academy lives in the inner city. They come from all over the county. However, we do our strongest recruiting in the urban neighborhoods, because those are the families that we feel called to reach, and so we're reaching out to them. But anyone with a Knox County address can enroll.
Anything else before we wind up or down, however you wind. Anything at all? Well, Kevin, you've been a blessing to us, not just tonight,
Likewise.
but you're a blessing to us in your work every day. I'd like to close out with a prayer if we could.
Thank you.
Lord God, we thank you for Kevin. Thank you for his heart, for his faith, for his love for you and the people with whom he works day after day, and the people for whom his heart yearns, even though they may not be nearby. Thank you for the foundation. Thank you for birthing it and for continuing to bless it in its ministry. And we pray that all of us might day after day seek to be the kind of servant that Kevin is. We pray in Christ's name and for his sake. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Kevin.